I guess I didn't swag enough. Stupid fruity pebble chain. We bag enough. I guess I didn't swag enough. Stupid fruity pebble chain. We bag enough. Poppin' tan model BC couldn't brag 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 enough. I guess I didn't swag enough. Stupid fruity pebble chain.
And welcome everybody to the Horizon Roundtable. I am your fill-in host, Jim Cerro. With me again this week is Greg Kula. Greg, thanks for joining me to talk Horizon League hoops.
Yeah, glad to be back. Very fun week of action. Excited to start talking.
Yeah, and I think there's only really one true place to start this week, and to me, that's with the Oakland Golden Grizzlies. They go on the road to Wisconsin. They start out at Milwaukee, go to Green Bay on Sunday, and they come home. They got to be feeling really good about themselves. They have a 2-0 week in Wisconsin, and they give themselves a little breathing room in the standings because Milwaukee was kind of in there. Green Bay was tied with them coming into that game. 2-0, big week for them. Let's start with the game against Milwaukee, though, last week on Thursday. They get a 73-60 victory over the Panthers in Milwaukee. Do you have any great takeaways or bad takeaways, for that matter, Greg, from that game?
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out to Oakland and that really stands out from the top couple teams in the league right now, meaning Wright State, Oakland, Green Bay, is they're not shooting a lot of threes. And you've got the bottom of the league right now trying to put up a lot of threes. This game, they went 4 for 16 from three, which 25%, not absolutely horrible compared to some of the other teams we'll talk about in a second. But they're really just pounding you right at the basket. I mean, they had two guys with over 10 rebounds. They had scoring across the board against in Milwaukee for that game. And I mean, anytime you're only going to give up 60 points and it was split evenly 30 each half, I think that you're just playing a very different style of basketball than a lot of other college basketball is being played right now. And it's working really well for Oakland. Obviously had the really nasty game last week against Wright State on national television, but they really came back, and these two games are amazing.
You know, Greg, it's interesting you say that because I had the, I guess you could say, privilege, although I was a Green Bay fan, it wasn't much of a privilege to see them on Sunday in Green Bay. However, I took one takeaway from this is like their guys are big. You know, Michael Hogue, Buru, Isaac Garrett. These guys are like, they're not super tall, but these guys are built, and you don't really appreciate it until you see them in person. And they're very bouncy. You know, they get up, you know, rebound well above the rim, and they're super physical. And so, to your point, they're not doing it with threes. In that Milwaukee game, you know, they were 25% from three. They're only 42% overall, which isn't terrible, but certainly not like a great shooting night. And they won by 13. They won now. There was a little bit of chippiness in the game, and I know that the Panthers were not pleased with how it was officiated. But they got to the free throw line, you know, more. They were 19 of 24 versus Milwaukee was 10 of 18. So in a close game where neither team was really shooting that well, they just were able to, you know, get the points in the paint, get the points at the line. And then on Sunday against Green Bay, they led by a lot. I mean, they won by 25. I think they led by 28, and they got into double digit and, you know, pretty early. And there, it was a little bit better shooting game in terms of their shooting splits. It was 58, 50, and 88. I mean, you're going to win a lot of games when you shoot like that. And then something else that was, you know, of note to me, that was Green. Sorry, I have the wrong stats. Let me go back to my Oakland. Again, they were 54, 40, and 62. So they didn't shoot great from the line, but they did really well from the field. And they were plus 24 in the paint. They were just men. Plus 18 on the glass. Like, it was amazing, you know, watching. As frustrating as it was for me, it was amazing because you have these big, strong dudes. And I think Buru, I heard a rumor that he taught a master class in physicality today at the Crust Event Center afterwards because he was just such a beast. Anything from that game that stand out to you, though, Greg?
I mean, you just put a little bit of emphasis on the rebounding. I mean, 42 rebounds, 50 points in the paint. And I mean, Yeah, I mean, I think it goes right along with the Milwaukee game. They kind of did this exact same thing, other than maybe they shot a little bit better in the second half in this game and just were able to put up more points. But on the defensive side and the rebounding side, it's the same thing every time they go out there. And I think I said a couple weeks ago that Campy's really found his guys. And I mean, Robinson played 35 minutes today, but he's averaging 36.2 minutes a game, which is the most in the league in conference play. So he, again, Oakland knows who to play, and they're getting their guys to perform right now. And they're a scary team.
Greg, what's so interesting to me is like seeing them in person in Green Bay, seeing the week that they had in Wisconsin. And I look at this as a team that just got blown out by Wright State, and I have not had the chance to see Wright State in person yet. So that has me really concerned for, like how good is Wright State if they're whooping up on these teams and, Oakland is just pounding everybody else. Like it makes me think, man, Wright State and Oakland, it kind of feels like a two-horse race already, just because they have clearly sent a message that, hey, play us at your own peril. And speaking of Wright State, they got a little sweet revenge against Youngstown. You remember Youngstown beat them in the first game of the conference play. It was a close game in Youngstown. This one was at the Nutter Center. Wright State won the game 93-83, I believe. Anything from that one that stood out to you, Greg?
Kind of like I said about Oakland, Wright State's not shooting a lot of threes. Only 9 out of their 60 shots they took were from three. And they went 5 for 9 on the game from three. So maybe they should have shot a couple more. But just like Oakland, they're out rebounding everybody. They're playing this game without Mari Bay, I know, because I think he went out during the Oakland game. But they were able to get plenty of production from everyone else. Michael Cooper's finally back. So he only played 16 minutes and only had 4 points. But that'll also be another jolt for a juggernaut already. So I feel like them in Oakland, yeah, like you said, they're kind of a two-horse race right now. Very well-rounded scoring. Birch had 24. He also put up 7 assists and 5 rebounds, which is just a crazy stat line all the way across. And they're just same thing. They're getting the ball inside. They're making the 2-pointers as opposed to the rest of the league that's trying to put up a lot of threes.
The other stat that stood out to me, Greg, they only had 7 turnovers in that game. And so you think about they shot their splits were 53, 56, and 86 shooting. And so a team is able to work the ball as well as and get good shots like they were getting, and then you don't get them to turn it over at all. I mean, you're facing a really uphill battle if you're the Penguins in that game when you're not forcing any turnovers. And I think we almost buried the lead there, but Michael Cooper had such a good start to the season. He got hurt. He didn't play a ton, and to your point, Birch has been more than capable stepping up. But to get a major piece like that back, and to have a top of the league record, and now you're adding a piece. I mean, that's scary to think about. To me, that's scary. Like thinking, like, okay, where's the rest of the season going to go for them? And if you're playing Wright State, moving forward, you've got your work cut out for you. Greg, I want to move around the league a little bit. There was another team with an undefeated week that I'd like to talk about, and that is Purdue Fort Wayne. They only had 1 game, but it was a revenge game against Milwaukee. If you recall, right before the start of the new year when conference play restarted, Fort Wayne went to Panther Arena in downtown Milwaukee, and it was an unkind trip for the Mastodons. However, after that game and after the Green Bay game that followed, the Mastodons have really righted their ship a little bit, and they got a little sweet revenge today. They took down the Panthers at home 100-82. I think the ultimate revenge, Darius Duffy had 13 points in that game, former Panther playing for the Mastodons. He was 6 of 6 from the line. But what did you see in that victory for the Mastodons over the Panthers?
I mean, I think I was just shocked that they put up 100 points. They're averaging 73.1 coming into the day, which is last in the league. So for them to all of a sudden just throw up 100 points, I mean, obviously, when you get 34 points from Stevenson, that's kind of going to help you get there. But on the flip side, Milwaukee had Aguilar put up 35. So it was pretty. You had two guys going at it pretty much the whole day, but yeah, Purdue Fort Wayne's right there in the middle where I'm kind of not sure what to make of them. They're they're putting up a lot of threes. They're second in the league at 3 point attempts, and sometimes they're just not. They haven't been falling this year. Um, they're seventh in the league at percentage wise. But when you've got guys like that can put up that many points, like Stevenson, and obviously Hadnot, who had 19, and then you mentioned Duffy, but then Craig also had 20. They've got guys that can score. It's just the shots have not been falling at a regular rate in some of these conference games so far. But I do think that they're maybe a little scarier than some of their stats are looking right now, and I think this game proves it. I mean, because again, 100 points. I don't think there's more to say.
It's interesting when you think about Fort Wayne because they started conference play back in December in the first round of games, the 2 or 3 that got played, and they went to Oakland, and it was a super entertaining game. Oakland won, but it was kind of a shootout. And then they got the big non-conference win over Notre Dame, but they really lost their way there for a hot second. And so I almost feel like that, last in points is kind of misleading because they had 2 absolute clunkers in a row offensively. And that happened when there hasn't been enough games yet to average out the points. So I definitely agree that I think Fort Wayne a little bit hard because it's always been feast or famine with them, but definitely one to keep our eyes on here as we, round into the second half of the conference slate. And in that game against Milwaukee, when you're shooting 56% overall, 57% from deep. Same thing with Wright State when I just touched on. They only had 7 turnovers against the Panthers. And so when you think about that, you're not getting any stops and because they're shooting at such a high clip and then they're not turning the ball over, so they're getting tons of attempts. That's the recipe for an 18-point win, all day long. And so that game really got played into the way Fort Wayne wants to play it as opposed to maybe the way the Panthers were, looking to play.
And I just want to mention it because it's.
Yeah.
I mentioned it 2 weeks ago. I don't remember where they were at 2 weeks ago. I wish I had my paper in front of me, but they're now 5th in all of D1 for Ken Palm's luck stat. So I'm not sure how to take that, but I found that wild that they're actually 5th, and number 1 right now in luck is Kent State, who Miami of Ohio is going to be playing on Tuesday to try to go 20-0. So I think Miami might be running into someone that has a little too much luck on their side.
Well, in Miami of Ohio, I know this is not the Mac Zone podcast, but Miami of Ohio hit that 3 at the buzzer to take down Buffalo. So maybe they got a little luck on their side too. So somebody's luck is going to run out. Cinderella is definitely at the ball in the state of Ohio. I'm looking around here. It's not Ohio because they are Northern Kentucky, but they are the Cincinnati market. The Norse had a 1-1 week. They started out super strong against Detroit Mercy at home, pummeled them 96-71. There's a lot of fun stats to grab out of there. Did you happen to see anything that caught your eye in that Northern Kentucky win over Detroit Mercy?
I think just LJ Wells. He had an absolutely incredible game. He was 11 for 15 shooting, 11 for 13 at the line, 7 rebounds, 35 points. Only 3 fouls. He also had 3 assists. I think he's having kind of a monster season. At least I think so. He had a good game against Robert Morris as well, but this game against Detroit Mercy, I think, is just absolutely insane, and it shows how good of a player he can be. And then on top of that, you've got Ethan Elliott, who had 7 assists in that game, only 1 turnover. And then on the season, I thought this is absolutely crazy. He has 55 assists and only 7 turnovers, which is a 7.9 turnover to assist ratio, which is obviously number 1 in the league.
It's funny that you say that because we have been talking a lot about Brody Robinson and his playmaking ability, or Al Vargas. And so you maybe sleep a little bit on Ethan Elliott, and yet Robinson's turnovers have kind of ticked up a little bit as conference play has gotten underway. But Elliott, I believe is a true freshman, not a 30-year-old freshman or something like that. And he's a young guy making plays and finding really great teammates. I mean, it certainly helps when you have super dynamic players like Goretzka, Wells, and O'Day to pass the ball to, but he's still getting them in their spots. So that's a great stat to point out. The interesting thing about the game against Detroit Mercy, so they won by 25. They got to the free throw line. They didn't even shoot that great from the free throw line. They're 23 of 31, but Detroit Mercy only was 3 of 9. So there's a 20-point difference in a 25-point game right there at the free throw line. So, but they just had tremendous shooting overall, 54% from the field. The crazy thing to me, though, is when you think about the way that the week played out, Northern Kentucky then plays on Saturday, still at home. They get Robert Morris, and Robert Morris was coming off of a wound-licking experience that we'll get to in a second. But that game goes to overtime, and the Colonials come out the winners against Northern Kentucky. So where did they go wrong from Thursday to Saturday? What do you think happened to them where they got a big win and then back that up with an overtime loss?
I think you kind of ran into two guys that are two of the top 7 rebounders in the league. Chitakunis and Good had 11 rebounds and 10 rebounds, and they out-rebounded them by 10. And in such a close game like that, every single rebound's going to matter. Robert Morris had 18 second chance points, and Northern Kentucky only had 11. So, I mean, you can point to that for possibly being the game. I just think I know LJ Wells, obviously, he's 3rd in the league rebounding per game right now. But when you run into two guys like that who are coming off the bench and playing over 30 minutes, they got way too many rebounds in the game. And I also it seems like every game this week that was close was by 3 points. So I don't think you really have to take too much out of this because they very easily could have won this game, but I wouldn't. I guess I wouldn't take too much out of this.
Yeah, statistically, you see a 3-point loss in overtime. The stat that I saw, 6 of 26 on 3-pointers. That's not a great number, and so I've talked about this before on the podcast. For as good of a rebounding team as Robert Morris is, they're not super physical offensively. So there were more points in the paint for Northern Kentucky than there were for Robert Morris. It was 44-38. And so you're doing so many things right. You have O'Day I believe O'Day had 38 points in that game, but you have so many things going right. And then you go ice cold from 3, 6 of 26, and you lose by 3 in overtime in a game that they really needed to win. So a split week for Northern Kentucky, but as the old saying goes, you got to win your games at home and split on the road. I'm not a big fan of that. I like to win on the road too, but I know that for losing at home is the most sour of sour tastes for any of the coaches and players in this league. Since we're talking about Robert Morris, they had a split this week as well. They were on the road. However, they had a split that I'm sure that they're not really looking at too favorably. They went to overtime in both their games, and the first one was at IU Indy. And so IU Indy gets their first win of the Horizon League season, 96-93 against Robert Morris. But where do you think things went off the rails for the Colonials?
I guess you could probably just point to the turnovers. I think 18 turnovers to 8 by IU Indy in that game, and IU Indy had 33 points off those turnovers. So that right there is probably the game. IU Indy is obviously going to force a lot of turnovers with the way that they press, they play defense, but 18 is quite a lot against them even, and to not get even 10 against IU Indy is problematic. Then, I mean, other than that, they played a pretty complete game. Honestly, they shot over 50%, 48% from 3, 77.8% at the line. You had 4 guys in double figures. You kind of did everything else. You out rebounded them. You had more assists. You really kind of point to a complete game, other than you threw the ball away a couple too many times. Yeah,
the turnovers is really in a 3-point game that went to overtime. 18 turnovers. I mean, that's a tough one to take. And obviously it's IU Indy is working with that full court press. It's different. It's unique. They're consistent in doing it every possession, so it can wear you down over time. The other thing that stood out to me, though, for Robert Morris, minus 10 points in the paint. So both games this week, they got outscored in the paint. So again, like to my theme of like, hey, you've got these big physical guys that can rebound, but they're not able to, especially in the case of Chidakudis, because he has struggled at times to finish, and then he gets fouled, and he's not that great of a free throw shooter either. So there's a little bit of they got to work through that. But yeah, tough. That's a tough loss for them to the Jaguars. But then they go on the road 2 days later, get another overtime win. They still shot well. They shot well from three in both games. They were 11 of 28 against the Norse, 39% from deep, plus 10 on the glass. But the guy who really bailed them out in my mind was Ryan Prather. He was so strong. He was just a man attacking the hoop. He was like, it was like a Donovan O'Day clone, because Donovan O'Day is super strong attacking the basket, and Prather, while not as explosive, he's a physically built guy for a guard, and he just he put his shoulder down and he got to the hoop so many times late in the game, and really got them some easy buckets that they needed to kind of put that one away. Was there anything else for the Colonials that was standing out to you?
I don't think anything else other than what I mentioned. I mean, they also almost kind of gave that away with the 16 turnovers they had. So, and I think, Northern Kentucky had 21 points off those turnovers. So same thing almost came back to bite them in that game, but they were able to pull it out. But again, 3 points. Yeah.
You were talking about IU Indy. They get a split this week, 1-1. They get the win in overtime at home against the Colonials, and they battled on the glass, only -4 on the glass against one of the better rebounding teams. They actually shot the ball well. For them, they have not shot well from three. They're 8 of 18, 44% in that game. And we talked about Robert Morris, 18 turnovers. IU Indy only had 8 turnovers. So now you're creating more possessions and converting those at a high level. So they got the win. They followed that up, though, against Detroit Mercy with a 3-point loss at home. What do you think about that?
Well, they got to the line quite a bit in that game against Robert Morris. They were, they had 35 free throws, and then they really kind of went back to their shooting a lot more threes. They had 11 more 3-point attempts in the game against Detroit Mercy, and obviously to knock them down kind of been the story of the whole year when they lose. But they just didn't get to the line because I don't think they weren't taking a lot of those inside shots. And I mean, other than that, it looks like a very typical IU Indy game. You got about 5 guys that put up double figures. You get out rebounded. You foul a lot. They had 21 fouls, and they just don't hit their threes. It's just been kind of the same game to me every time I look at a box score or watch a game of theirs. It's pretty much the same thing, other than that Robert Morris game. And I don't really know where they go from here, because again, it's just the same thing over and over.
So it's interesting for my viewpoint. So against Detroit Mercy, 3-point loss, they had 21 assisted baskets versus only 13 for Detroit. What that kind of tells me is that the Jaguars are going to kind of need to add some more pieces. Obviously, they're not doing that well. They're only, and their conference record isn't that great. So it's like, of course, Jim, they need more pieces. Yeah, great insight, Cero, you dumb. But when you think about that, like they played a good team game, 21 assisted baskets versus 13, but Detroit just has, maybe a worse, I don't want to say a worse style, but like the better players, that are able to execute a few things. And, it was a 3-point game. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that, you don't want to give up on any season, and there's still a lot of basketball left to play and help guys get better. But as Indy adds players and then starts to use the system with, guys that are maybe more on the level for where the Horizon League, is at, then maybe you can overcome, some of the shortfalls that they ran into. Because, getting to the line 10 times, that tells you maybe you don't have enough athletes to like get downhill and put pressure on the rim. But they did a good job of sharing the rock in that game. Like I said, 21 assists. So IU Indy, though, 1-1. Detroit, 1-1. We talked about them a little bit the assist thing I'm going to talk about again, though, because in that 25-point shellacking at Northern Kentucky, they shot terribly. They were 38, 29, and 33 for shooting splits, but they only had 8 assists on 30 field goals. Greg, 8 assists on 30 field goals. So that's my point. Is like they did not get in their 2 games they only had 21 combined assists. So it's stylistically maybe a little one-on-one. And Lovejoy 4 of 17 shooting against the Norse in a 25-point loss. Like I think this is one where what's the old saying? Burn the tape. Burn the tape, Mercy. Like we don't want to see that one again.
Yeah, and you mentioned the free throws before too. I mean, yeah, 3 for 9 from free throws. I mean, they had 78 shots. This box score is absolutely confounding to me. It doesn't look like it was an actual game that was played. I watched a lot of it, so I know it was a game that was played, but the final stats just do not look like a real game.
Yeah, those numbers, those are like 2K numbers or whatever, video game numbers. So in the game against IU Indy, they didn't shoot very well there either, but they did get to the free throw line, 26 of 30. So 3-point game, better athletes, getting downhill, attacking, getting to the line. So I don't know how I feel about Detroit Mercy right now. Like in terms of, they're in the middle of the league, but I'm not sure which direction things are going for Detroit. Do you kind of have we're not asking people to mortgage their house and place financial bets on this, but do you kind of have a feel for where you think Detroit is heading after a split week?
To me, these games maybe seem to be showing that they maybe play down to their opponent or play up their opponent a little bit, and taking out the fact that they shot so that the Northern Kentucky game made no sense, because in the IU Indy game, you went up against a team that is second last in rebounding, and you ended up only out rebounding them by 2 when you're the best rebounding team in the league. So I don't really understand how you can win a big game if you're going to play like that against an opponent like that. To me, it feels like they're going to play IU Indy or someone in the tournament and underestimate them and lose by 3.
All right, I like it. That we're getting, Greg. This is why you're on. You give us you give us your opinion. You don't hide behind anything. That's awesome. Let's see. Let's go. A couple other teams that had split weeks. Let's go to your squad. I know the Cleveland State Vikings. They go 1-1 on a homestand. They started things out in the game that you're not going to talk about based on your most recent Twitter post that I was tagged in, but all kidding aside, they lose at home to Green Bay, 88-73. They had a 10-point lead early. Unfortunately, they had 0 defense in this game, and Green Bay came back. It took a little doing, but once Green Bay got the lead, they never looked back in this game. As a Viking fan and also somebody observing the league, tell me, one, how did you feel watching the game, and what did you see from your Vikings?
So I think, Green Bay is just so consistent. What he's put together is just every single possession on offense and defense looks the same, and it's working, and it's getting the right shots, and maybe it's the end of the shot clock, but it's the right shot always. Cleveland State, the same kind of thing happened. Josiah Harris is out again, so they're already down their best rebounder. Dare I say, probably their only rebounder right now, which I'll talk about in the Youngstown State game as well. But they were just completely out-rebounded in the second half. At halftime, it was 12-12 rebounds, which is crazy how low that was. But that's just Green Bay slowing it down. But then in the second half, it was 15-7 for Green Bay. And that was just a lot of the points. I mean, that was a hard game to watch, because it really is 2 completely different styles of basketball. And Cleveland State wants to run, and Green Bay obviously wants to slow you down. But Cleveland State really played to Green Bay's pace, and it kind of worked in the first half. I know Green Bay kind of made that run at the end that made it a little closer. It was only 3 points deficit at the half for Green Bay, but the second half, Cleveland State just could not play defense. I mean, there's nothing to say. I mean, you give up 51 points, and no matter who's shooting, you're not going to be able to keep up with that.
Yeah, and I thought that Cleveland State was a little undisciplined. I saw multiple times guys off their feet and then having to find a pass as opposed to, playing off of 2 feet and giving themselves more options. I thought Priest Ryan he only had maybe 2 turnovers in the box score, but he had a couple of possessions in a row where he just was forcing things a little bit. That's his name, right? Priest Ryan, that number 4? Yep.
Yep.
I thought he was forcing things a little bit. And then defensively, I mean, Green Bay is a really good cutting team, and they just, they turn their heads so many times, and, CJ O'Hara's, cutting to the hoop and Readinger's finding him. That's the Green Bay thing is that, disciplined, and that's why you said everything kind of looks the same, and where it works for them is that they exploit your mistakes, and they did a good job against a somewhat undisciplined effort from Cleveland State in my mind. But we have to give credit where credit is due, because Cleveland State came back against. Now, Bob and I have talked about this. Is Youngstown State the biggest rival? I know you said Butler was, but it is a rivalry game at some level. So they came back and won 80-78 in a game where they shot really well, 51, 50, and 77 with the shooting splits against the Penguins. Nessa with 26, Beard with 16, 4, and 3. You got something from Foster Wonders. You had a nice game from Chevalier Emery. Tell me a little bit about what the secret sauce was for the Vikings as they got a big win, a much needed win over secondary rival Youngstown State in your mind.
So I'll recant what I said about Butler because I was obviously just joking about the 20 teens or I guess the late 2000s.
Hey, I'm gonna Greg, say, before you go into this, hold on. They had some legendary battles. If for anybody who was around in that time period, they had some mega games. Like those Butler teams that went to the Final Four, I'm pretty sure they had to knock Cleveland State out in the Hinkle Fieldhouse in the conference tournament, if I remember correctly. But those teams had some massive battles. So no, you do not recant. No. Absolutely not on my watch, not on this podcast, not tonight. Tonight, we are living in the past, my friend. But all kidding aside, the Youngstown State, I know it's a good geographic rivalry, if nothing else. Yeah,
I don't even think that, and I'll be frank here. The reason that Youngstown State's not our rival is because Youngstown isn't really a city in my mind. So I think Robert Morris to me is more of a rivalry because of Pittsburgh and being like an actual. But I digress. I think that Cleveland State in this game it was really strange because they obviously want to put up a lot of threes, but they only put up 20 in this game. And you had Nessa go into the hole, you had Emery go into the hole. And that kind of opened everything else up. That kind of opened up Beard being able to knock down some really tough threes. And then on the flip side, you had Youngstown State put up 43 threes and only make 8 of them. That's 18.6%. And they only took 16 free throws. So they were living completely out on the arc, and it did not work for them. They almost pulled it out. I don't know if you watched the last possession for Youngstown State, but they had 2 chances to take the lead and to tie it. But somehow Cleveland State did come down with the win. And I got to give a lot of credit to Coach Summers because he got a technical foul in the middle of this game, and he was very emotional about one of the calls. Beard hit a tough 3 and got knocked down, and they didn't call a foul. And I love to see the energy. I think it really pumped up the team, and I love to see that emotion coming out from him. I think the first couple of games of the season he was a little more reserved, kind of getting into the position, but the last couple of games you can really see he's really into every moment, every single game, and making sure that he's vocal on that bench.
It's funny that you say that, Greg, because I took note of in the Green Bay game, in a few times when I'd watched earlier in the season, Summers is like him, he was a guest on the podcast early before the season even started. And I mean, just a genuine, just nice, like he just gave off the most nice guy feels on it's like, hey, we can have you on here talking for hours, man. But like, we got other guests we got to get to, kind of like, but he's just a good dude. And so I took note of in the Cleveland State game against Green Bay, he had a couple times where, he had, I don't want to say he lost his cool, but he got intense. The fire was in his eye. You could see in his face, like, he's normally got that big smile and that, just that, like that vibe going. And no, he had some absolute fire in his eyes. And so you could see, things turning a little bit for the Vikings, and, maybe it's their backs are up against it a little bit, but they responded. To your point, he got technical today. They responded. They got the win. They got a much needed win. Go to 1-1 for the week, and with that win, they actually passed up Youngstown in the standings because they have the head-to-head advantage over them. So it's that's big. Nobody wants, somebody's going to finish last, but everybody is everybody but Youngstown apparently is battling hard right now, and we'll talk about them in a second. But I just appreciate that they responded. But then with the flip side of that, you think about the Penguins week, 0-2, lost to Wright State, didn't play any defense, they got pounded in the paint. They didn't even shoot that bad in that game. I mean, they shot numbers that would normally win a game, but they didn't play a lick of defense in that game. And then you back that up against Cleveland State in a tight game where, to your point, they shot horribly. They were +9 on the glass, so they did instill their will that way. But you get all those rebounds, and if you only can make 38% of your shots overall and 19% of your threes, you're fighting uphill. And something else I noticed about Youngstown, for as deep as their team is, and they had almost too much, if such a thing exists, right? Too much talent. They only had 11 bench points today. So maybe it's been hard to get some role definition for them here in league play, but they are on a struggle bus to I don't know where, but it is not rolling right now for the Penguins. Is there anything else that you're seeing from the Penguins?
I think you said it with you're getting all those rebounds and not making shots. The one thing I forgot to mention about the Cleveland State game, Youngstown State put up 73 shots and Cleveland State only had 39, and they won. I don't I don't think I've ever seen a team get out rebounded and put up almost essentially half the amount of shots and win. You're right. They're not playing great defense. To give up 80 points to Cleveland State when they're not even shooting threes is a bit crazy to me. And then obviously to give up 93 to Wright State is bad, but I guess not as bad because it's Wright State. But yeah, they're really having a tough time, and completely the opposite of what I expected. A little happy obviously about the Cleveland State game, but I have no ill will towards Youngstown State, and I think it's not the kind of team that we were expecting. And there's a couple guys that are still having good years, though. I mean, Chris Carroll, to me, still having a great year.
Yeah, they get pieces. Vlad had a couple nice games here recently, but he hasn't had the impact for the season that people thought that he might. Dawkins is reasonably consistent in the mid-teens in his points per game. Reasonably effective. But yeah, they went from having a really nice non-conference where they were battling tough teams, winning at Grand Canyon. They get the Wright State win to start conference play, and it has been straight to the bottom after that. I'm about to say something, Greg, that's wildly inappropriate, but is this the kind of team that 3 years from now we're going to be reading gambling probes on, and they're going to be like, oh, some East Coast mafia got to these guys or something? It's I can't even explain. They have so much talent. They have a great coach. They usually play really good defense, It's so confounding to try to understand like what's going on with the Penguins when a season with such high hopes is really gone sideways for them right now. So, as a Phoenix fan, and the Phoenix play them on Thursday. As a Phoenix fan, I don't need them to figure this out anytime soon, but there's too much. They have too much good in their program in terms of the players and the coaching and the momentum that they had. At some point, they're going to shake this off and figure it out, but it's just been a real struggle for the Penguins of late. Speaking of struggling, I want to talk about the Milwaukee Panthers for a quick second. They had a tough week. They also went 0-2. They lost to Oakland and lost to Purdue Fort Wayne. The Oakland game, this is a stat that you have to double check sometimes. 2 for 20 on threes. I'm going to say that again for those in the back, for those that didn't have the volume all the way up. 2 for 20 on threes. So they only shot 34% in the game. They're really, that in today's era of basketball where you're taking a lot of threes and they took 20, granted they had 70 shots is a lot of shots, but they only hit 24 of their 70. Just a arctic shooting performance from the Panthers. The only positive I can see in that game, Sekou Kona had 16 and 11. So at least, they're next man up filling in for the injuries. Kona had 11 rebounds in both games they played this week. Did you catch anything of note from their box score or highlights against the Golden Grizzlies?
My favorite part about the 2 for 20 is they made 1 of 10 in each half. So it was just consistently bad. Yeah, like you said about Kona, and 6 of the rebounds in the Oakland game were offensive too. So I think that's pretty big. But yeah, you're right. Another team that's just struggling right now. In the game against Purdue Fort Wayne, every single guy that played had a negative plus minus. There wasn't one guy who even had a 0. Every single person was negative. So there's nothing going right. Even Amar Aguilar, who had 35 points, he was minus 13 for the time that he was on the court. So obviously you could take that stat with a grain of salt because that stat's not absolutely great, but that just I think shows exactly how bad they're playing right now.
Well, you have to play on both ends, and defense has been struggling for them. The other thing that I noticed in the Fort Wayne game, and I'll be candid for Horizon League fans and Panther fans when I say what I'm about to say. I did not see the game because I was in Green Bay today and had to drive back to Milwaukee where I live afterwards. But 9 assists on 29 buckets. And they shot 48% for the game, but only 9 assisted baskets on 29 buckets. Like that's too much one-on-one. And Amar Aguilar is a dynamic one-on-one player. So if he's going for 35, it's him just kind of more than likely catching a little bit of a heater and going at it. But he's a guy that Panther fans have consistently said isn't necessarily a great defender, and that would check out, if you think of the position he plays at guard, and the guards for Fort Wayne had big days too. So yeah, a really difficult week for the Panthers. Kona, I want to go back to him for just a second though. He had 11 rebounds in both games, and you hit on in the Oakland game, 6 of those rebounds were offensive rebounds. When they came to Green Bay a couple of Mondays ago, I was with our friend from Fear the Phoenix, Brian Dickman, and he came in the game. I said, Kona's an offensive rebounding machine. And this is not unlike Buru and Garrett and Haug from Oakland. Kona is not like jacked like those guys. He's long and lanky, and he's got a decent build in terms of he's not a stick, but this is not a guy that's like necessarily going to overpower you. He just has great instincts and great effort around the offensive glass. And so there's a guy that, and I happened to see him in high school. I really liked him in high school as a player. Sekou Kona is a factor on the glass. Anybody who's playing the Panthers, at least, their team might be struggling, but you need to box that dude out. And even having that guy boxed out, he is so long and he just reaches around and grabs the ball. I've seen him against Milwaukee or against Green Bay. He reached over somebody and grabbed the ball. Like that guy just wants the ball when it comes off the glass. So everybody needs to be very aware of him going forward. And to think that he's a redshirt freshman, so like as his body gets a little more built out over time, that's a guy that could be a major factor in this league long term. So while it's not been good for the Panthers recently on the court, at least you have some things you can look at and say, all right, here's a guy who's from Milwaukee, transferred back to be home. You have to feel reasonably good about retaining him long term if you're a Panther fan. Greg, there's one more team I want to talk about, or that we have to talk about, and I don't really want to because I'm currently still struggling to process what happened against Oakland. But we will talk about Green Bay's win over Cleveland State. Fantastic shooting, 19 assists on 29 made field goals, out-rebounded them. And I just love what you said about like their consistency, possession by possession. They really work hard at that idea of like, hey, we're going to play our game. We're not going to get, they go late in the shot clock a lot. Like, that's part of, they don't like walk the ball up the court every time, but their tempo is really low. They're slow. It's partially because they just keep working until they get a back cut, till they get an open shooter. And, I heard Coach Gottlieb in an interview this week. He said, offensively, it's pretty simple. We're going to let our shooters shoot. We're going to let our drivers drive. And we're going to let our cutters cut. But everybody has to know who they are. If you're a cutter and aren't a great shooter, then you can't take bad shots. And you see the guys almost to a fault, like turned out, like guys like LeBron Thomas or CJ O'Hara, who aren't great outside shooters. Unless they absolutely have to, they are not taking shots that aren't their shots. And so I really appreciate that about them offensively. The challenge that they ran into, though, against Oakland is that they don't have anybody that looks like Oakland in terms of the front court players. Oakland has dudes, grown men in the front court. And Green Bay has length, they have skill, but they don't have those big, thick, athletic guys. And so, unfortunately, they ran into the buzzsaw, and then they paired that, couldn't get a rebound with 5 of 24 from 3 for 24%. That, I don't know much, but that is getting killed on the glass and then not shooting threes is a recipe for losing by 25 points. So I don't know. Did you watch any of the game? Did you see anything different? Because I'm watching. I got my Green Bay glasses on. I'm all in my feelings, and the two of the referees were big time in today. By the way, Paul Skells, who's like a high end referee, does a nice job. His calls aren't wrong, but that dude, the way he controls a game is like a fun sponge. And it took like I'm with my 8-year-old son today, and I couldn't swear. I couldn't get mad because I don't want him, picking up bad habits. But man, that was tough watching Paul Skells work the game today. But anything else that you caught from the game?
So I was not able to catch the game today, but
you didn't miss anything.
No, the only thing that I saw actually was Campy's interview after the game, where he kind of said very similar things about what you said about how Green Bay just doesn't have a threat inside. I'm paraphrasing his words, so go back and watch it. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly, I think, what happened, and you didn't have to worry about that, obviously, against Cleveland State because you didn't have Harris to go up against. But yeah, I mean, I literally wrote on the top of my sheet here for Green Bay, consistent, and I just think that that's the way they're playing right now. I do think, and I've been trying to think of some way to say this joke, but I think it's funny that Green Bay, who's coached by a radio host, beat Cleveland State, who got rid of their radio station. There's some joke in there that I can't figure out, but
somewhere when Bob goes to edit this podcast and post it, he's going to be mad at you. He doesn't want to hear about that radio station. That brings fire. It brings those Rob Summers eyes to Bob's eyes. We don't need to make Bob mad at this time.
But yeah, I think Green Bay's playing well, but yeah, I don't know if they're going to be able to match. When do they play Wright State? You said this week,
February 1st. So they go.
Okay.
Green Bay goes on the road to Youngstown and then Robert Morris. So you've kind of got 2 road games against teams with decent talent, but kind of scuffling along, struggling in the case of Robert Morris. But they're in those games, like in case of Youngstown, like. Youngstown isn't necessarily getting their butt kicked. They're just struggling to, close the deal. And then they, 2 days later on Saturday, they're going to play at Robert Morris. And that was a 1-point game the first time around. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Phoenix respond to this. The thing that really is hard with Green Bay. At 4 different times this year, they went to St. Thomas and just got their doors blown off. They went to Wright State and couldn't have looked worse. They went to Campbell, and I mean, that was I haven't slept 8 hours straight since the Campbell game because it comes up in my head sometimes. And then today against Oakland. So there are just some matchups for them where doing everything right isn't enough. And today was one of those days against Oakland where Oakland just has much more physical players and got off to a huge rebound. I mean, eventually Green Bay was able to rebound a little bit, and guys like Ramel Bethea and Vukasan Todorovic, they got in there and made Haug and made Garrett and made Buru think for a while, but then eventually those guys adjusted and just kept on rolling. So very, very frustrating for the Phoenix, but I know long term Green Bay is actively, they have a 7-footer committed for next year, a junior college player. They have a 6'10" high school senior committed. So they've got some bigger guys, some reinforcements coming. That doesn't help them for this season. And, this is one of those feelings, Greg, and as a fan, sometimes we can't see the forest through the trees. Green Bay is still 6-3 in this league and still in the top third of the league. So yeah, they've got a lot of dust to get off of them. A lot of wounds to lick today, but they're still in this thing. So the response is what's going to matter here for the Phoenix. But yeah, very, very difficult game in many regards for Phoenix fans today. Anything else that you want to highlight or shout out while we're on the pod?
There was one more thing I wanted to say about Green Bay, and I'm forgetting what it was. I think, and this check. You can go check me on this. I think they're last in assists per game, but the last 2 games they had 19, and then they had 18 today. So I think that's an interesting uptick there to maybe watch, because I think they're only averaging 13 a game. And obviously the way they play, the slow way they play, you're only going to have so many possessions. But I think that was something that shot out a little interesting. And last thing about the Cleveland State game, I asked this to Summers in my interview after the game, but there were just a lot of times where, like you said, guys were having to turn their head so many different times that all of a sudden you're missing one assignment where your 2 guys are going after one guy, and then Green Bay had a wide open 3 in the corner or a wide open 3 right on the top. And that just led to a lot of points in the second half.
Yeah, the thing about the assists, because I've been thinking about that for the Phoenix, is they have had some very low assist games, and yet they have in Preston Rieger, one of the better playmakers. He's got he has a really good assist to turnover ratio in conference play, if I remember correctly, and he's had a couple of mega games. In Cleveland State, he had, I don't know, he had 10 assists. I think he was only 3 rebounds away from a triple double, and one of the things I've come to accept or have to accept is that some of their offense is generated through guys like Justin Allen and CJ O'Hara, who are just tremendous at getting into the paint on their own and finishing. Like, they're just really tough finishers. That style of offense isn't necessarily lend to assists. Like, sometimes, CJ's a really good cutter, so you'll see like a Preston Ringer hit him with a bounce pass as he works the baseline, things like that. Or you'll see them, get a lob over the top to Ramel Bethea for an assist. But they have a couple of players who are just really good individual one-on-one guys. And in a couple of games this year that they won, those guys were just cooking. I mean, you can't get an assist when it's like, hey, get the ball to, Justin, he drives in, spins around in 3 times until he finds his angle, and then finishes high off the glass. Like, there's no assist there, but still good basketball. So I guess that's the point of like what Doug had said. You're going to let your drivers drive, your cutters cut, and your shooters shoot. And they've just done a good job of that and figuring out what they needed in any particular game.
ESPN is happening now. We don't know.
So that's what we got. I think it's a good place to wrap up. We, have an interesting week. How many league games have happened for most teams now? About 9? Is that where we're at? Yeah, 9 or 10 for most of them.
Yeah, Wright State's played 8, and then 9 for most of the teams.
Yep. So this is really, we're in the middle, getting in the thick of it. We're in the middle of the season now. We've got, some interesting developments in terms of Youngstown struggling, Milwaukee struggling. Those are teams that were expected to be doing well. Conversely, you have Oakland, who was expected to do well, is doing well. And Wright State continues to get keep the machine moving. So we've got good Horizon League basketball. It is an interesting thing because we talked before about the Butler Cleveland State era. That was a defensive era of Horizon League basketball. We don't live in a defensive era of Horizon League basketball. I mean, there's some just really high scores that are coming out of the league right now. But it's been entertaining, and I can't wait to see what happens next. But, Greg, I want to thank you for joining us again on this week's episode. Greg, where can people find you on social media?
On Twitter or X, gkula13. My name will be Gregory Kula than you on there. That's where I post mostly. I post occasionally on Blue Sky on the same thing, but mostly on Twitter. And happy to be here again, Jim. Obviously, join the Patreon. I'm sure that Jim will talk about that in a second, but it's been a blast being on here again. Yep,
and thank you for setting that up. And for anyone who appreciates the coverage that Horizon Roundtable is providing, please, first of all, subscribe to all of our content, but go to patreon.com and support the writers that are putting out such great work for fans around the league, keep everybody engaged. And I know that it's not the Expanding Horizon edition, but I'm also going to give a plug for, we are in January. We are less than 2 months away from the Horizon League tournament. Consider making your plans, even if your team's not going to be there. Consider making your plans to get to Indianapolis and be, for many of the fans, like it was interesting today. I had 2 people who I've never met before come up to me and recognize me from listening to the podcast. And so it'd be, great to make as many connections as possible. I will be in Indianapolis. Don't let that sway you if you don't want to go now, because Jim Sarah will be in the building. But anyway, get to Indianapolis, join the Patreon, and follow Greg, who has one of the better play on words for a Twitter handle out there. Follow him on X. Thanks again, everybody. That is this week's edition of the Horizon Roundtable.